This podcast is sponsored by Systems Accountants, a specialist global resourcing solutions company focused exclusively on accounting technology and finance transformation.
It's not every day you get the honor of speaking to a former captain of the United States rugby team, someone who played in 2 Rugby World Cups, a player that has been inducted into the USA Rugby Hall of Fame, and a very successful businessman who is making a major contribution to rugby well after his playing days. The person to have achieved this and much more is none other than Dan Lyle. Dan, thank you for taking the time to chat to us at the Rugby Business Network.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Firstly, Dan, tell us how and why you decided to play rugby professionally back in the early 90s when rugby was not as popular in the United States as it has become today.
Yeah, well, back then I was attempting to play American football post my collegiate days. And certainly the American system is set up where you play scholastic sports, high school, university, and then maybe try to go professionally. Our international thought process for a long, long time was just Olympics. So if you were going to play against other countries or compete against other countries, there was the Olympic model. So American young boys and girls grow up in that scholastic to college to pro or the Olympic conversation. So and it was just emerging that the Major League Soccer and USA Soccer and a few other sports were pulling more kids into that place where representing your country was more. It's not, the Rose or the Springbok or those where it's not necessarily what you have in the back of your mind. You have, you think about all of the time. But I was, as I was trying to play American football, stumbled into rugby at a first cousin playing the game of rugby in Washington, D.C., where I had graduated university and was looking to whether I was going to go in the military, whether I was as an officer, whether I was going to try to do any number of things. While I was participating in tryouts and trials for the NFL with the Washington Redskins, I tripped into rugby, and I just found it at that very moment the culmination of every sport that I had played growing up. It had the elements of soccer and elements of basketball and elements of football, and I just almost fell in love with it the first touch.
Well, Dan, many rugby fans, they'll remember you obviously as the towering 8th man who led the United States at the Rugby World Cup in 1999. But it's your impressive club career and achieving 125 caps at Bath that rivals your achievements with the Eagles. It's now been 14 years, though, since you hung up your rugby boots as a professional player. When you decided back in 2003 to call time on your international career and a year later at the Leicester Tigers, did you have any idea what you wanted to pursue as a career thereafter? And did you have anyone that assisted you in this transition?
Yeah, well, certainly. I guess I was acutely aware coming to professional rugby a little bit later. I showed up to Bath in August of 1996 and turned 26 in that September. So I was more mature, I guess, in a lot of ways. I wasn't coming out as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old at that point. So I worked several jobs. I'd had my degree, and I'd already had a few of those moments of what am I going to do with my life, per what we talked about just there. So I guess I got stuck into the community-based side of the club pretty quickly. Getting out into the business community and into the grassroots community pretty quickly. And right at that time, right out of the gates, a year out of the gates within professional rugby, the Players Association was formed, and I was Bath's first rep to the Players Association, and quickly was on the executive. So that was 3 or 4 players, along with our chief executive and a few others. So was right at the beginning of those first collective bargaining agreements and player welfare conversations and all of those things. And a lot of funny stories of, I guess, Martin Johnson and Lawrence Delalio and Kieran Bracken and others that were there. And I was always the mouthpiece because I didn't have to worry about getting picked for England, so I could anger the clubs or the RFU at the time and so forth. But yeah, I got stuck in pretty quickly, I guess because I was a little bit more mature and knew that rugby, there was a fragility to it, right? It wasn't a career in America, and it was brand new there. And while we were all of a sudden getting paid money to do it and a decent wage, I didn't know how long it would last.
Yeah.
So I guess I was pre-prepared for those moments of don't just show up to training every day and go home and put your feet up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Dan, you would have had a very good vantage point, though, of seeing how players in the English Premiership went about pursuing careers after rugby in comparison to how players in the United States did at that time. What are the main similarities and differences you noticed between the two?
Well, I think a lot of times back in that day, the programs when it went from amateur to professional, you listed your club, and then oftentimes it had your career, what you did as a profession. So even today, more than 50% of the U.S. team lists a profession. They're working. They're not just a professional rugby player. And certainly, the players' associations and the club initiatives and so forth have created a continuity and let's do something with your life. You're better to do something on the day off or something for all the professional countries. But the U.S. is still carpenter and doctor and teacher and whatever it may be, half the time. So I think that's the main difference between what the American player still looks like and 20 years on, where you're a professional rugby player through and through, whether you play in Super Rugby, the French League, American English League, whatever you might do. But you've also, hopefully, because of the knowing that the rugby can be done within a day or within one injury, that so many guys are pursuing degrees and pursuing work job schemes. And continuity throughout the week, and it's not just something that teams are seeing as a need just to give these guys an outlet, but I think they're seeing that the players that are doing that are actually playing better on the field. Rugby is an aptitude-based game, and I think if your mind is engaged, you're thinking of things besides just rucks and scrums and lifting weights, that you're able to actually perform better each and every week.
Well, Dan, you've walked the path of transitioning out of a professional rugby career and into a business environment rather successfully. I'm sure being able to effectively network would be a good starting point, but what advice would you give to someone on the brink of ending their professional rugby playing days and looking to move into the business space?
Well, I think rugby has a lot of parallels to the military, where there's a lot of men and women that transition from our militaries into civilian life. So transitioning from rugby, back into the real world, if you will, or to the workplace. I think that you need to take the skills that you've learned in rugby, and hopefully that right from the beginning, as a 17, 18-year-old, just out of an academy or just out of university, whether 20 or 21 as a player, all over the world, that they've been engaged with hopefully the club sponsors and a community based as I did in the first parts of my career. So they're actively doing that, but they're able to use, I think, just like the military, some of those intrinsic values that not just that the military is a disciplined, structured environment. Rugby is a camaraderie based, discipline. Environment that not. I always just say that not one person is going to cure cancer in life. It's going to take a team of oncologists and doctors to do that. So you're used to working in team environments and then subgroups, and then coming out and performing. And if you're used to having your name in the paper every single week with a grade next to it, funnily enough, the real world is actually a little bit easier. You're not being told what you're like every single day of the week, so you're able to, some people take it as I've got to transition my life, and you oftentimes have to go down. You have to go down in pay. You have to go down in structure. But that same kind of learning thought process of being part of a team, if you can do that, and you've been preparing for that, that whether it's from day one or later in your career, that you're going to have to make that transition, and it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of rebuild that, that stature that you might have had as a senior player in a club, then you will do well. And I think that's where sometimes it breaks down, where they're not prepared for it, both from mentally, and that's primarily all it is. It's the top 6 inches of what you've got to think about. and you've hopefully tried a few things, a few internships, a few work days, a few community days out there, and made a decision whether you wanted to be in rugby still at a coaching level, or if you wanted to transition into some other aspect of business that you or life that you've always been waiting to do.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you are undoubtedly an ambassador for the game of rugby now. I mean, which was evident right from after your retirement when you joined United World Sports, and then you went on to become its executive vice president, and then you became the tournament director of the USA Sevens. Why did you decide to stay close to rugby after your playing days instead of, moving on to somewhere else and on to other forms of business away from rugby?
Yeah, I suppose that, just like those first days of professionalism, and rugby and the top 10, 15 teams in the world is kind of at a 2.0 level. They've gone through maturations, but those early levels were, we were taking ex-players and making them into directors of rugby. We were taking CEOs from other businesses and making them CEO of rugby, and physios and all the sports structures and services that people came from other sports or other organizations to do that. And now people have matured their way through. There just wasn't a lot of people that were doing the same thing in American rugby. And, to be able to take all of the lessons that I'd learned and experiences that I'd gotten, playing rugby on every continent or every habitable continent, for the U.S. and playing so many years in professional sports, it would have been a shame, I guess, if I didn't. But I also saw that maybe coaching, and I like to coach. I love coaching all my kids now, and it's a great dynamic, and what a wonderful profession. But there was probably enough people that were already doing that or trying to do that. There was really the administration. How are we going to pull these things together and create, the dialogue of how to fund the sport and how to put business plans together and how to put that was probably primarily missing. So I guess I threw myself on that bonfire to try to get after that, and there's been like any professional, highs and lows, mistakes and successes, but certainly growth. And I think American rugby is now at that place where how does it professionalize the game, beyond just a professional league, but more and more professionalism, more and more business plans, more and more strategic direction, and for it to take that next level. And those building blocks of those foundations have been being laid by a few people. I guess I pioneered a little bit of the playing side, and now I've been pioneering the business side, but and more people are now coming into the space. And certainly my new gig with AEG certainly shows that it's one of the world's largest sports business companies wants to be involved at an international level and at a domestic level. It shows that the sport is growing well.
Well, you just touched on my next question there. AEG, in October last year, if I'm not mistaken, it was announced that you had left your position at United World Sports as well as with the USA Sevens, and you linked up with AEG to help them expand their rugby platform in the United States and abroad. What sort of networking was involved in making that switch happen for you, and how have the last 6 months been for you at AEG?
Well, I'm lucky in a couple of ways. I live here in Denver, Colorado, and two of the biggest American and international sports groups, the Kroenke Sports Organization, Kroenke owns Arsenal, the Rams in NFL, but the Avalanche in hockey, with the Rapids in Major League Soccer. They're based here, and they've got a great team. And then the Anschutz Corporation, which AEG and it's all the entertainment facilities and sports comes out of, were based here. So I got to know several of these executives, and I think a big thing for some of the listeners is that there's sports commissions and sports agencies and that are community driven, that want to bring events and structure to most cities. At least that's the way it is in the U.S., and I think it's that way in a lot of different countries. So I just got involved in the Denver Sports Commission and got to know some of these people, and that's the same type of dynamic group that the Rugby Business Network is. That you get involved, if this is your profession, or you're involved at that level, you've got to go out and find and be part of these types of groups. So I did that and got to know some of these people. And it was really through that networking dialogue that as we grew our portfolio at United World Sports of events and merchandising and media, that we were bound to be bumping into all the big organizations, the CAAs, the Octagons, the IMGs, the AAGs of the world, and just creating partnerships and exchange of ideas. And AAG, I think over time, because they are so global, that we manage events all over the world and facilities all over the world. They were bumping into rugby in Europe and Asia and Africa and Australia, New Zealand. That they just made a offer that, hey, do you want to help us enter the rugby space? We're into just about every other sport, soccer and hockey and football, everything. Why don't we enter that space? So it was a great career move to go beyond just the management of tournaments and infrastructure. And but that's been a wonderful dynamic, right? You've got to have building blocks. You've got to learn, right? You've got to understand, how to build. And rugby or sport is just a series of events, whether it's a season or not. It's just a series of events. And so starting off at that level of learning how to create an event, manage an event, expand it, broadcast partners, international federations, sponsors, ticketing, all the different things that go with it, that allows me to walk into clubs in the UK, Ireland, Pro 12, France, Super Rugby, and talk to them at the same level. How are you doing things? And then, luckily I also have the performance background, right? So able to understand the dynamics between the two. And I think that's where the rugby business is both successful and at loggerheads, when the performance team and the commercial team work together, right? They have to be somewhat symbiotic, but certainly, they often butt heads internally at every union and every club. But anyway, I was able to then parlay all that decade of experience into this job.
Well, AEG, I'm pretty sure that you guys have got some upcoming events that you're going to be involved with. Can you mention just a few of them for our Rugby Business Network listeners?
Yeah, well, we're happy. Hopefully most of the listeners will have seen that we've just announced our 4-year agreement with the English Premiership to host the regular season match in the United States, starting with Saracens versus Newcastle, which will be September 16th in Philadelphia. And so the two-time European champion against, the Newcastle of Johnny Wilkinson fame, and Dean Richards, the director of rugby, will be coming in. And I think the dynamic there is not unlike the NFL going over to Europe, playing a regular season game. And we'll parallel that with helping the English Premiership and in the 12/13, I include Bristol in that because they're such a dynamic club coming up and going down, but probably come back up, and who's in that food chain moving forward. But but to help them expand their American platform, they're not coming over to create a league, but to help individual clubs and to help individual markets expand their broadcast rights and sponsorship rights and so forth, and help American rugby be more dynamic. That parallels that 4-year agreement. So an English Premiership strategic plan parallels that match is the outcome of hopefully a year-long dynamics. That's one that we're going to be super proud of because it helps both sides of the ocean. We're also working with USA Rugby. I've got a great relationship with Dan Payne, their CEO, on some other pretty cool initiatives with their test match season, working together potentially with Super Rugby on some stuff in the United States. Certainly there's just a whole level of dynamics. Countries like Ireland and Scotland, South Africa, Australia, they have such a big food chain, not to mention obviously the New Zealand brands, but there's a lot of Japan in the World Cup for the next World Cup in 19, and there's such a dynamic relationship with the West and the West Coast of America. We're working on thought process and ideas, and further, we're in conversations with a number of Premiership and Pro 12 teams on helping them in their markets. We're experts at facilities. We're experts at game day operations and management and naming rights and merchandise and all those things. So helping those that are in their own markets get better at what they do. So there's two sides of the coin, the international side, and we'll be expanding that, as we get up and running and build the AG rugby team.
Well, AG, they seem to be in good hands with having you on board with them now, Dan. Finally, it was a momentous year for you last year when you were inducted into the USA Rugby Hall of Fame. I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner, but anyway, Dan, the bigger rugby union playing nations such as New Zealand, England, South Africa, they all have well-established Hall of Fames. Why do you feel it's important for this to exist in the American sporting culture?
Well, what's a wonderful thing is that the USA Rugby Hall of Fame was created by the USA Rugby Football Foundation, which is which is older than USA Rugby. It's a foundation that was created pre USA Rugby that was officially chartered in 1975. And they saw, just like everybody else, to create a legacy and a recognition for those that have done well. This year, the USA-Canada game, July 1st, the day before, is this year's induction on June 30th. And USA Rugby and the Football Foundation are doing it in partnership together for the first time, which just shows, as we talked about at the beginning of this, that connection, which is now happening in American rugby. I think that we're such a big continent, that we're not just one market. We're 12 or 16 markets, and the bringing together of those people that have been doing such a tremendous job of trying to grow the game on this continent, bringing together under kind of one roof some of these bigger initiatives like the Hall of Fame is something that's happening. I'm really proud that that's happened. May Harris, Dan Payne from the USA Rugby side, and Brian Bizard from the USA Rugby Football Foundation side have come together to do that, and so that's great. I think honoring your past and looking to the future is what every organization should be doing. I think that's what culture is, because you understand the expectations at that point, and Hall of Fames and these type of recognitions do that, and to do it in conjunction with a World Cup qualifier, against Canada is the right vehicle, the right medium to do these type of things. So excited that, yes, I stand on the shoulders of so many wonderful men and women that have done things in the past. So, I'm proud to be part of that group. I laughed when I got inducted because, in American rugby, it's not usually a couple of years out of playing. It's more, decades after that there's some recognition. So I think I'm one of the youngest guys that have gotten in. So I don't know if it was, if they were waiting, so forth. But as I said there's lots of, I got a long runway of helping this game continue to grow. I'm just in the middle of my tenure, hopefully, to keep to get into the top 5 in the world, to make it a top 10 sport in America, and all the things that we aspire to do.
Well, Dan, it's been a massive privilege speaking to you on the Rugby Business Network, and all the best in your future business endeavors and growing the sport we all love.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And the Rugby Business Network is a wonderful organization. I'm happy that my former job, helping to bring Penn Mutual, who's one of the sponsors over here for the Rugby Business Network, into that. And it's a wonderful organization. So anybody in America or abroad that's listening to this, Google the Rugby Business Network and have a look at it. It's a great organization. And thanks for having me.